Hey there, my name is Frog, and welcome back to another video. Today, we'll be talking about Copenhagen Flames. Now, if you haven't heard the news, because maybe you're living under a rock, Copenhagen Flames have essentially benched their whole lineup. Roy and Nicodos have already been acquired by Fnatic, and meaning that Yabi, Huxi, and Siphon are all currently benched on Copenhagen Flames. And perhaps most importantly, in this latest roster move, Vorborg, the current or former, I suppose, coach and co-owner and director of esports, has left the organization entirely. And I think that's something that's, massive, and we'll touch on a bit about that later. But what I want to talk about in this video is, where do Copenhagen Flames take it from here, right? This isn't the first time that they've had to undergo a complete rebuild. They did the same thing almost exactly 2 years ago when the whole team was sold off to Existence. But I think this is going to be a bit different, again, because of Vorborg leaving. Still, we'll touch on that later. In this video, I just want to essentially share my thoughts on a prospective roster that they could potentially acquire, were I the GM of Copenhagen Flames. So a few things to preface, right? At this rate, the Flames have made the last 2 majors. They made top 8 in the last major, right? They just sold 2 players to Fnatic. And it's a club that historically has always kind of done this thing of signing young up-and-coming talents or players whose stocks have kind of fallen down, and they just build them up. They kind of just make them look brand new again, right? And then they sell the players for a profit to a bigger club, and that has allowed the organization to grow. It's gotten more fans, obviously placing the major. You got sticker money now. It's huge. The team has really grown, and that's great. So I think that at this point they're kind of like a top 3 club in Denmark, right? I think for the purpose of video, I wouldn't touch anyone on Astralis or Heroic, right? Astralis' main team, of course, because both of these teams are, well, like, they're in the top. I don't see anyone necessarily wanting to leave at that point, especially not for Copenhagen Flames. But I think outside of that, the Tricks, the Masonics, and stuff like that are all definitely teams that, if Copenhagen Flames approached, a player would be willing to join. Another thing to mention is that in the actual rebuild, it's very possible that the likes of Huxi, Yabi, or Siphon would remain. They could return to the new team, but for the purpose of the video, I'm not going to consider them, although having Huxi as the captain would make things a lot easier. And the final thing is Vorborg, right? As I mentioned, they once rebuilt their full team. They've often lost star players, in-game leaders in the past, but they've always been able to bounce back, right? They sell that player for a profit. That gives them a bit more budget to potentially go and sign someone who's a bit more experienced, or, attract an up-and-coming star player that might go to another club. But I think the key piece in doing all of that in the past has been Vorborg, right? His ability to scout out these players and really put every piece together in a way that functions, it's almost unparalleled, right? The only person that kind of reminds me of that is Kerrigan, and obviously Kerrigan is an in-game leader, and much more experienced and all that, so it's a little different. But finding all these players and putting them in the perfect roles so that they really perform, and sort of min-maxing their development is kind of unheard of. And it was something that I wrote about when I first started in esports, Copenhagen Flames and Vorborg's role in that specifically. But again, doing this now that Vorborg isn't here, I don't know how well Copenhagen Flames will be able to replicate that formula. Hopefully they will. I'm still a big fan of the club, but we'll see. Anyways, for the video, I'm going to kind of assume that they can still kind of keep on that track, keep doing what they sort of did historically. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. What is my lineup? Well, as with any team, I would always go for my in-game leader first, right? And if you've watched my academy lineup video, you'll recognize this player. For my in-game leader, I've gone for TMB, right? Formerly of Mad Lions, still contractually tied to them, but who knows? TMB, if you followed Copenhagen Flames, as you will know, is like a 2-time alumni. He's represented them twice in the past. Now he's 20 years old. He's a little bit older. But I just think that there's not a lot of IGL options in Denmark right now, right? There's MSL being like an obvious one, but I don't see him leaving Gorillas or ever joining something like Copenhagen Flames. You've got like Larson, who's recently become available. There's likely somebody, maybe Bird from Sky would be an option, but I don't exactly see him leaving Ecstatic for that. yeah, there's Nato Safix, I suppose, who has led in the past, but he also often wants to be the AWPer. There's not a huge amount of options, but I think TMB makes a lot of sense. Again, he's played for the club twice in the past. He's older now. He's always been a very malleable player, and I think that returning as an in-game leader makes a lot of sense, especially as he's kind of like a Kerrigan in that he just makes room for his team, right? He takes on a lot of really aggressive roles, and he just kind of does what is necessary for the team to perform, and I think that's something that's very valuable in a player. But again, he's younger, he's 20, compared to Hooksy, who I think was 26 or something. It certainly does take away from the sort of like experience that an in-game leader has, and might set back Copenhagen Flames a little bit if they're trying to attain the same level of we're attending majors consistently. Still, TMB I think is a good option, and that's the leader I've chosen. So there you go. For the AWPer, I think Lucky would have been a great AWPer to pick up, just because he really fits that narrative that Copenhagen Flames have of, oh, we pick up this player that stock has fallen, right? Think of Mertz in the past, or Refresh, or Tesses, people who joined a team, weren't really on par, but before that looked like really promising players, and it just didn't work out in the specific lineup. Their stock has fallen. People aren't willing to give them a chance. But Lucky, as of a recording a few days ago, has recently rejoined Tricked, which I think is great. I really want him to perform again, so it's nice to see him return to that. But that would have been my number one. Otherwise, I think in that same vein, AWPer is definitely somebody that Copenhagen Flames could pick up, because AWPer is insane, and he's also quite experienced, so that kind of counterbalances TMB being a bit younger, in my opinion. But he's an insane talent, right? He just wasn't really able to showcase that in MOUZ, and it's going to be the same thing where a lot of people hate on AWPer for not really living up to what we expected him to. And I'll be the first to admit, I expected a lot more from him on MOUZ myself, but what he has shown on Mad Lions and his teams in the past, I mean, it'd be crazy to pass up on AWPer, in my opinion. And again, Vorborg is not here anymore, but if they're able to kind of continue what they did with Tesses, right, who had joined Optic after looking really, really good on Squared and Golden Gita, he joins Optic, he's uncontracted, it's a bit of a weird thing, he's finally attending big events, he's just playing under MSL, and it's not really working out for him. He doesn't look quite as good, people really ridicule him, but now he's on, Heroic, and he's one of the somewhat best riflers in the world, right? I think the same could be done for AWPer. I could definitely see him doing quite well in Copenhagen Flames, and seeing them pick him up and develop him and kind of fix him back up again, make him look brand spanking new, right? So TMB, IGL, AWPer, AWPer. The third piece that I'm going to pick up is Fessor, right, of Astralis talent. I think Fessor is probably the best just pure fragging talent in Denmark right now that's still up and coming. He was by far for me the most interesting player on Astralis talent when he was picked up, and I think also just generally what he's shown is that he's kind of a level that's above Astralis talent, but not quite yet ready for Astralis. I don't see them promoting him anytime soon, just because they've got huge names on that lineup. And even if, say, Zipnix has been underperforming, I don't see them promoting him in his place. But Fessor, insane player, right? If any of you have watched We Play Academy League Season 4, he's been by far their best player, although it's not to take away from Altex or Breezer, who have also looked really, really good. As a whole, Astralis talent is looking much more cohesive than they have in the past, but I think Fessor has been just the mad fragging talent, and out of all the last few matches they've all been on Mirage, he's just been absolutely insane, dropping 30 bombs left, right, and center. So I think Fessor is definitely somebody that, kind of like Zypha, you're taking a chance on somebody who's not super established, but the fragging power is just there, so you kind of have to take that gamble. And I think that's something Copenhagen Flames historically have done, taken gambles on young up-and-coming players. So Fessor would definitely be my young star that I'm bringing into this roster. So TMB, AWPer, Fessor, and now we're on to my fourth player. I kind of wanted somebody who's a bit more of a supportive element, somewhat like Yabi, and Yabi is an exceptional player. So finding somebody with his kind of like positivity and attitude and his aim as well, right? His headshot percentage is kind of crazy. Who's got no ego and is willing to support. It's difficult. Like that's a 1 in 100 million player, right? Like you're not finding guys like that very often. But somebody else who kind of reminds me of that a little bit is Kragan from Masonic, and Kragan is not quite the same role for role either, but he kind of gives me that same feel of like a player who's very positive, who's there for the team. He just wants to do what's best for the team to succeed. He doesn't care about his individual rating, and he's just there to win, right? He's got that hunger and passion. And I think that while, you know, playstyle wise it would be a little bit different, there'd be a little bit of adapting, I think that bringing in another younger player like him would be really good. Now, that being said, I have TMB, who's 20, Fessor, who's, I want to say, like 21, Kragan, who's around that same age. You've got a lot of young talents in this team, and a lot of people who, yeah, decently experienced. Kragan's been on Masonic for a bit now. Fessor's been around the block a little bit, and has been on the Strauss talent for a while. But you know, you've not got a huge amount of veterans. And so that'll be my final player. I'm looking to pick up somebody with a lot of experience, but not necessarily just tier 1 experience, right? I want somebody who's been around the block for a while. Because if you look at Roy, he got his start really in Copenhagen Flames. He played for a few other teams beforehand, but they were all a lot smaller before joining the Flames initially. But he's just an older player who happens to be really, really good. And I kind of wanted to replicate that. I considered, you know, maybe the likes of AZ, maybe the likes of Borup, even Kirby before he was announced by Endpoint. But for this roster, for my prospective lineup, I've decided to go with Sandin as my sort of veteran player. I believe he's 26 now. And he's somebody who's been around the block, right? He used to be on SK Gaming, I want to sound Copenhagen Wolves, and really had his first breakout year in 2017 when he was on eFuture and Team 123. And he's been active kind of that whole time, but hasn't really been able to break out up until really 2021, and even 2020 was looking pretty solid as well. But like the past 2 years, thus far into 2022 as well, he's looked really, really good. He was on AAB Esport, and then ex-AAB. He was on Los Reyes for a little bit, and then most recently he was playing for Nasser, where he, I believe, picked up in-game leading for the first time. Anyways, all that to say, individually, this guy's really good. It kind of reminds me a bit of Rals, currently of Sprout, who, you know, was someone who was around in the earlier days, right? I think he started playing professionally maybe in 2014, 2015, I think 2015, and has just kind of flown under the radar this whole time, but is now like rising up and playing really, really well again. He didn't take a break compared to Rouse, I don't think, but still, like the kind of the I don't know, the parallel, I suppose, is there. TMB, again, IGL, AWPer, Op, Fessor, Young Fragger, Kragan, kind of that supportive element, and Sandin as my veteran. I think this lineup makes quite a bit of sense. You've got a lot of firepower, you don't have a lot of ego on this lineup, a decent mix of experience, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have, like, too many young players with no experience, right? Because Zyphon, prior to joining Copenhagen Flames, hadn't really been on any relevant teams, whereas I feel like Fessor, Kragan, TMB all have. And you've got some older players to kind of balance it out a little bit with AWPer and Sandin. I think this lineup really fits that narrative of scouting out young up-and-coming players and giving them that platform to grow, and also picking up people who haven't had the best opportunities in the past, like Sandin or AWPer, and just allowing them to kind of show what they've got, right? Prove themselves, and prove the haters wrong, really. Will they be able to replicate this without Forborg? That is the main question, right? And again, it's very possible that they do end up picking up like more experienced players, right? You know, people like Borup or Nico or Valde even, right, are all available. It really, I guess, depends on what Copenhagen Flames want to do moving forward. Are they looking to attend every major and kind of stay within that top 30, top 20, maybe even top 10? or are they looking to just, okay, we got to build up again? You know, we're building from scratch, and while we have more financial resources now from selling all these players and maybe some sticker money and new sponsors and stuff like that, we just want to invest that in a bigger coaching staff and having more resources to develop these players as we've done in the past, because that is what we do. I guess that's ultimately left to be seen what they end up doing. As for the coach, I guess that's something I didn't really touch on. It's a little hard to say because I don't think there's a lot of coaches in Denmark right now. Somebody I'd give a shout out to is probably Fetish, right? Who was on Lyngby Vikings most recently, I want to say. And he did really well with that team. They brought in a lot of good players, like Dafu and Manx, obviously. But it's, you know, I'm not sure he's really looking to return to the scene quite yet. Otherwise, there's Ave, who recently left Astralis, but I'm not really sure what he's up to. And that's kind of it in Denmark, really. There's not a lot of options. There's always the possibility of like a Cyclone or Barry, right? An in-game leader that just transitions towards coaching. But they may also have to look internationally, as they did in the past with like PETA and DJL. Ultimately, I guess we'll see. Obviously, they have my FR Danish O brother, Frøslev, or I'm not actually sure how you pronounce it. Maybe Frøslev? I don't know. But anyways, Frøslev, who's the assistant coach, and he seems to be staying on with this rebuild. Maybe he gets promoted to head coach. They bring in another analyst. I don't know. But I think the coaching role will be a little bit harder to fill. If they want to hire me, my DMs are open. But otherwise, in all seriousness, I think coaching is a little bit harder right now. There's not a lot of options. But ultimately, I think this roster has a lot of potential. It really matches that Copenhagen Flames narrative of just bringing in these young talents, bringing in these players that have experience but haven't been able to really showcase what they're made of, and giving them that platform. I think that within a few months, this team, again, because of the fact that there is no ego in this lineup, it's a team that's hungry to win, players that are really hungry to show themselves and show what they can do. I think that this is the kind of team that fits exactly Copenhagen Flames, fits the story of this organization, and also could easily make it back to the top within a period of time. Because if you were to look at the team that made the major, right, Nikodos, Yabi, Huxi, Roy, and Xiaofun, you know, that's not the lineup a lot of people would expect to make top 8 of a major. But with enough hard work, patience, and dedication to these players, they did it, right? And I think that's something that they could continuously replicate again. So there you have it. That's the video. If you have any alternate suggestions, alternate players that you would have liked to see, I'm very curious to know. So drop a comment down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.